on reading retention and integration practices, Mortimer J. Adler, who was chairman of the Encyclopedia Britannica, said, "If you don't read with a pen in your hand, you're not reading." So I'll share my reading retention and integration practices. First, on retention, I do think Adler is right. Let's use this copy of Francis Yates' The Art of Memory that I just finished, and this is how I keep my notes in this book. And you keep going forward, and eventually you run out of blank pages, and then you start dog-earing the next blank pages, and you keep them going here. And so you might have 5 to 10 pages in a book of nonfiction. And one thing that's helpful is having little codes for the stuff that you care about. I'll have, for my favorite quotes, I'll have the cash symbol and Q for money quotes. T for timeline, as well as XB is my symbol for Lex's brain, which means I need to integrate it into my digital brain, and that's part of my integration practice. So first, when I read, I put all my notes in the back so it won't disturb the next reader, and once I'm done with it, I'll let it sit and marinate for a couple months before I move on to integration practices. So let's go over here to the computer where I integrate. This is my short stack of the books that I'm trying to integrate right now. For instance, Huston Smith's The World Religions. And so I go through the notes in the back of that book, and as I see things that I want to save, this is how I save things. This is XB, Lex's brain, and so it's mostly documents. And the 3 top-level ones are ideas in human relations, matter in the natural world, spirit, and the supernormal. I also have a cannabis and other psychoactives ones because that's my work. And so I have a timeline of world history where I put timeline type stuff, and I also have one for psychoactives as well. But for things that are just ideas and categories, for instance, here's the ideas and human relations doc, and I just have a whole bunch of different categories here. This one's actually, I'm still transferring from the old website I did, so it's not as many as I actually have. But stuff on books and libraries, everything about gambling or free will or play or psychotherapy. So whenever I read, especially a great nonfiction on that topic or an article, I put it in here along with some of the best ideas. And you always make sure to put either a link to the essay or to write the book and the page number that it came from. But one of the best parts of integration is waiting and going through the ideas again. And for integration, I really can't stress that part enough. It's going back over things again and again. We're like cows chewing our knowledge cud. And so the first time you read a book, you keep some of it in there. And it's less, I think, on a Kindle or an ebook reader. If you're just selecting the text, it's not as good as if you write it in the back. But it's about going back through it later and looking at those topics, looking at those categories, and remembering the best ideas, and then looking at these entries again when they happen to strike you for whatever you're writing or working on, and you look at just the history of tattoos and what they do to the immune system and stuff like that. And so for integration, it's about looking at the knowledge you have, and so this is like the giant brain, and then of course, the very, very best of thoughts goes up here on the hermetic memory wall, and then I'll just be here after a trip to the basement, and looking at this stuff and getting in my head. And I don't have any of this memorized, but by the time you've looked at something 6, 10, 12 times, you start to have it in your head well enough that you're really integrating and starting to live it, and it's there at the tip of your tongue, even if you couldn't exactly remember it. And with these like smart glasses that are coming, soon all of this stuff will be right there at your eyeball, and you can bring it up at any cocktail party that you want. But I feel like you have certain levels of knowledge. You have stuff you've read once, you have stuff you've looked through a couple of times, and then you have stuff that you've looked at a dozen times and you really start to have in your head. So that's my first advice for reading retention integration. I would love to hear what ideas you all have, and feel free to ask any more questions because this is my jam and this is really for my kids, so hopefully this will be helpful to them in 5 to 10 to 20 years.